Every once in a while, a game comes out that turns the industry on its head. Something that's so unique, engaging, and fun that it creates a new genre with numerous games to follow, all with similar design tenets, seeking to ride the genre's wave of popularity. Think of Rogue, creating the roguelike with its procedural generation and permadeath. Or Doom, spawning Doom clones, first-person shooters before that even had a name. And of course, Demon Souls, and more notably, Dark Souls, creating the Soulslike with its unforgiving difficulty and risk-reward proposition that was a revelation when it came out. As these new genres mature and the market becomes saturated with new entries, they need to change up the formula to stand out and push the genre forward. Games that fail to evolve the formula will be lost to time, obscured by those that preceded them, and labeled as only a clone. Steelrising is a Soulslike, one that has all of the design elements you'd expect of the genre. It's a third-person action RPG with twisting and turning levels, punishing combat, and that risk-reward pull that drives you to try again and see if you can get just a bit further next time. However, Steelrising isn't simply a Souls-like, full stop. This isn't a clone of From Software's seminal franchise. There are a number of changes, both big and small, that the developer Spiders, yes, that's their name, incorporated to set Steelrising apart. Spiders sits comfortably in the AA space, which happens to be what I gravitate towards most often. Not so big that the budget allows for all sorts of bloat to consume the design, with everything including the kitchen sink, but not so small that more ambitious concepts are out of reach. No, AA games allow for all manner of interesting design concepts, but with budgets that require smart choices. Spiders is a French developer, which will be important later, that specializes in RPGs. Never quite blowing the doors off with the reviews or sales, their games generally land in the 7 out of 10 range, but there's always a fun and unique experience once you can get past the rough edges. Most known for Technomancer and Greedfall, and even though both were very challenging at times, Steelrising is their first Souls-like. Now, while I'll cover most of the aspects of the game, I think it's most interesting to zero in on the areas that deviate from the formula established by From Software's genre-defining titles. And one of the most important deviations comes before starting the game, with a difficulty selection. Difficulty is one of the key defining traits of the genre. Even if you've never played any of the games, you know they're meant to be hard. Hell, prepare to die was the tagline on Dark Souls' friggin' box. So yeah, it's not exactly a secret. It's a meme at this point, but any tough game is called the Dark Souls of the genre. Super Meat Boy is the Dark Souls of platformers. Cuphead is the Dark Souls of side-scrolling shooters. Battletoads is the Dark Souls of beat-em-ups. Yeah, Turbo Tunnels can go straight to hell. That's harder than any Dark Souls game, and I will die on that hill. God! But these comparisons really make no sense. In general, these share nothing in common with Dark Souls, or the Souls-like genre, other than they're hard. But hard for who? Difficulty is one of the most polarizing topics in gaming, but one that's amplified in Souls-likes. On the one side is the get good crowd, who argue the struggle is integral to the experience. The catharsis and exhilaration you get when finally powering through a boss or some other challenge that seemed impossible after hours of trying is unlike anything else, and I agree with that. Now on the other side, you get those who say, well, what if I don't want to beat my head against the wall for hours? What if I don't have the time for that type of investment? Or heck, what if I know I'll never get good enough to overcome the seemingly insurmountable? The creator of the genre, Hidetaki Miyazaki, said, "Hardship is what gives meaning to the experience," when asked about the difficulty of his games. So, there you have it. If he said it, the conversation's over. Not so fast. Difficulty is subjective. What's easy for you may be tough for me. Like finding love.
Clearly this is all just a misunderstanding.
I mean, when someone can complete Turbo Tunnels blindfolded, or beat Dark Souls with a Guitar Hero controller, it's clear that hardship is a sliding scale. So at the start of Steelrising, you can choose Normal or Assist mode. Assist mode lets you change a few fundamental aspects of the gameplay, like how much damage you take, how quickly endurance regenerates, how easy it is to perform perfect cooldowns, and probably the most fundamental change, whether or not you lose XP upon death. You can change any or all of these settings, allowing you to really dial in the difficulty that works for you. And you're not locked in at the start of the game. At any point, you can adjust these settings, allowing you to overcome a specific boss, mob, or obstacle and experience the full game, even if you don't want to invest the time to get good, as it were. Now, if you ever toggle this on, some of the difficulty-related trophies will be locked out for that run, which I think is a fair trade. Another deviation is the story. Dark Souls and the broader Souls-like genre have often intentionally obscure stories. More than the time investment to get good is the time investment to understand just what the hell's going on, particularly in Dark Souls. Like a night with your mom, only the most dedicated will understand it. The stories are often only pieced together with scraps of lore, environmental storytelling, and inference. The fact that there are literally hundreds of multi-hour videos trying to explain the lore of Dark Souls should tell you everything you need to know. There's undoubtedly some satisfaction in piecing together the clues, or just feeling like you understand anything about the story and the world of these games, but Steelrising has a real, actual, honest-to-goodness story with cutscenes, characters, and voice talent. I know! Set in an alternate history steampunk version of the French Revolution with characters like King Louis XVI, Marie Antoinette, Cagliostro, and a myriad of other key figures you learned about in history class. Oh yeah, and there are robots too. Yeah, so to protect himself and his power when threatened by the sans-culottes and other revolutionaries, the king unleashed an army of automats, resulting in the destruction of Paris. You play as Aegis, Marie Antoinette's personal bodyguard. Unlike the mindless mechanical army, you're special. You have the ability to think and talk. When the queen sends you out to find her surviving children and the king who's gone missing, it's here that your story begins. Creating rich and believable worlds has always been one of Spider's strengths, but Steelrising is definitely their best yet. Even with the more fantastical elements, it's grounded by this real time period. This was a particularly tumultuous and bloody time in French history that has shaped France and French society, with reverberations felt even today. It's a uniquely French story, and one that should be told by a French studio. You heard me. It's amazing how they managed to achieve this mesh of 18th century steampunk storytelling. There are still a lot of documents, side stories, and environmental storytelling that adds richness to the world, but the story isn't hidden. There's a ton of cutscenes that lay it all out. But this isn't a movie or a visual novel, no. The story just gives purpose when out in the world. The gameplay is largely what you'd expect, but with a number of small tweaks to the overall Souls-like formula. You'll start in the character creator with a limited number of different visual options, including faces, hairstyles, and materials Aegis is made of. While I appreciate having some options, I really wish there was more flexibility here, and that's not unheard of for this style of game. I mean, Code Vein has one of the best character creators ever. After the visuals, you'll pick your starting class. And I don't know about you, but I always feel this pang of anxiety when picking classes. Like, how do you know what's going to suit your playstyle? And since your starting weapon is also tied to your class, I felt doubly hesitant. But fear not. While your class will affect how the first couple of hours feels, you can eventually use any of these weapons and build Aegis to fit your playstyle as you progress. You'll choose from Bodyguard, Soldier, Dancer, and Alchemist, which is what I went with. But there really isn't a wrong choice here, so no need to fear. Once you get out into the world, the game will feel familiar with light and heavy attacks, as well as special abilities for each weapon. You can dodge, and depending on your equipment, block and parry. You can give your weapon special effects like ice or fire, and since blocking and parrying isn't standard, you're encouraged to be more aggressive. Now, until more recently, Soulslikes have seemed to be allergic to a proper jump, but no clunky pseudo jump like from Dark Souls here. No, you get an honest-to-goodness jump button just like God intended, that you'll use quite often for navigation and exploration, getting you to higher ledges or to get items hung from trees and buildings. Through the lore, your stamina is tied to your mechanical body overheating. There's a rapid cooldown mechanic where you can hit Y or triangle to rapidly restore some of your stamina, which can be incredibly handy in a pinch, but there's a catch. You also take on a little frost damage. Take too much and you'll freeze in place, which, as you can imagine, in the heat of battle,
gonna have a bad time.
You can sneak up on enemies or build up their stagger gauge to get critical hits. As with any Souls-like worth their salt, there's a ton of different types of weapons, from fans to halberds, muskets, and more. And each of these not only plays very differently and scales based on different stats, but often also has some elemental damage too. There are 3 primary elemental effects in the game: fire, frost, and fulmination, just for the alliteration, and that last one just means lightning. Most enemies seem to hit you with an elemental effect at a certain point, and the worst one for sure is frost, since it can lock you in place, giving your enemies a few cheap hits. But the enemies are usually weak to one of these elements themselves, and this goes for the bosses, where attacking with the element they're weak to can wreck them in no time. And that's not to mention grenades that explode with a specific elemental damage. These are everywhere, and you can buy them too. Using grenades against bosses with elements they're weak to are so powerful, they're borderline broken. As a Souls-like, you should expect a lot of combat. That's the bulk of what you'll be doing. And most of the other Soulslike staples are there. Bonfires are called Vestals, souls are anima essence, Estus flasks are replaced by oil burettes. When you die, and yes, you will die, you'll revive at the Vestals, and you'll have to get back to the spot again to retrieve your lost anima essence. And you'll unlock shortcuts that make each attempt a little easier. There's also a slight Metroidvania element too, where you'll gain abilities from bosses that let you access new areas, like breaking down previously impenetrable walls or getting to higher ledges. And while this is not a revolutionary concept, it feels fairly novel for this type of game, and I'm here for it. These games already excel at giving you the serotonin burst when you find some new path, but there's even more when you remember a path from the beginning of the game that you can now access. Separate from the assisted mode, I found the game overall to be a bit less punishing than some others in the genre, like how you can use a compass to point you towards quests or your anima essence. The bosses, while still a lot of fun to fight and still somewhat challenging, never felt like hitting a wall. I'd often best a boss after just 1 or 2 attempts, which look, I'm not that good at these games, so that was pretty good for me. At Vestals, you can use your anima essence to upgrade Aegis and buy weapons or items too. Vigor and durability is really your health and stamina, and the other stats are what your weapons will scale off of. Each weapon scales off different stats, so having a high stat in a particular attribute that aligns with your weapon will have a bonus effect. Now, all of your stats have a level cap of 20. You can also upgrade your module slots, weapons, and items. The modules allow you to add attributes to Aegis to give passive buffs or other benefits. You'll gain keys to unlock more of these slots, as well as upgrade the slots themselves to increase the benefits. Upgrading your weapon requires a combination of anima and materials, and obviously the rarer the materials, the bigger the benefits you'll receive. Upgrading increases the base stats, like power, but can also increase attribute scaling, which dramatically improves the effectiveness of each weapon. Now what you'll find is that after around level 10, stats don't seem to have the same benefit, so after leveling to about the halfway point, I'd focus more on weapon scaling stats than your base stats to get the biggest bang for your buck. I recommend Performance Mode for that sweet 60 frames a second, which was consistent throughout and still looked decent. Now this game looks good, very good at times, but it never looks great. And with a small developer like this, that's to be expected. Great art design can overcome sheer graphical power, and that shows through quite often with really interesting and dense period-appropriate environments. However, since the game takes place in France during a specific time period, you'll see an awful lot of similar-looking buildings and alleyways. There'll be times you'll wonder if you were just here with how samey it can get at times. But with the consistently fantastic lighting and the overall clutter in the environments, things still look pretty good most of the time. Funny enough, the handful of human characters look more artificial than the robots, and that goes for the wooden facial animations, which look like, well, like this. And like, what's going on with these skin textures? And nothing about the visuals, but anyone else think those powdered wigs looked ridiculous? Good thing no one wears them anymore. There were some really interesting enemy designs here and there. The bishop boss with his little priest was a particular standout. However, they're all goddamn robots. So you'll see a lot of similar designs over and over. Though I'd say Aegis was a real standout in terms of design. She has all of these interesting little details that make her feel like this clockwork soldier. I really dug the little touches, like the animation of her arm going a bit out of socket when she's idle. This is a relatively short game, and a much easier completion experience than I expected. You can get all of the trophies in a single run, and other than a few that you'll want to prepare for ahead of time, like not using the oil buress or completing all of the citizen stories, you can take care of most of them organically as you play. Expect around 20 to 25 hours to do everything. As a first-time foray into the Souls-like genre, I think Spiders did a really solid job with Steelrising. Will it create its own new genre? No. This is very much a Souls-like. However, the interesting story and setting feels unique, and while the gameplay feels almost exactly as you'd expect, that's not a bad thing if you're a fan. For anyone interested in Souls-likes, or have been turned away by their difficulty, Steelrising is one of the most approachable games in the genre without sacrificing a challenging experience for veterans.